Hi guys, welcome to the second episode of the Lexicon podcast, the first of this new academic year. Today I'm joined by Paul Rim, and we are going to talk a bit today about some of the stuff we've read over the summer to do with our modern languages we learn, and also a couple of our tips for learning languages. I think some GCSE level tips, some A level tips, and then maybe if you're trying to learn a language by yourself, what you should look out for. So without further ado, Paul, do you want to get us going with some helpful recommendations, or what have you done over the summer to do with your language?
Sure. All right. So one of the things that I usually do over the summer regarding Russian is that I try to find some shows or some channels that have a lot of interesting cultural content, especially like that, which explores kind of niche aspects of the Slavic world, stuff that's not really covered, stuff that kind of breaks preconceptions about what there is to expect in the Russian world. And this channel that I found is called Bald and Bankrupt. Very interesting, very interesting name, but trust me, it's quite an interesting watch. He has quite a wide scope on content. He originally started recording videos. So he started off making content about Russia, and then as he traveled, then he traveled into other parts of the former CIS, the Commonwealth of Independent States, I believe. That's and he went to places like Ukraine, Belarus. I believe he went into Poland, Moldova, Central Asia. All former parts of the U.S. What was formerly the USSR, and he's now expanded into many parts of the globe. And he focuses on interacting with the day-to-day interactions of kind of living in the area, but also from the perspective of a tourist, and then also someone trying to integrate into a culture at the same time. And he gives a lot of insight into kind of living abroad, and also being a visitor to the country.
Okay, that's pretty cool. I do the same thing with Japanese. Like I mostly watch like people who live in Japan talking about like their local area, and it's quite fun on some of the more like the English orientated ones where they'll be speaking Japanese, and like you can try and not look at subtitles they put on the screen, and then try and like I don't know, translate it in your head, and that's pretty fun. But yeah, I've recently over the summer I did the same thing. I found a place called like Life where I'm from, and it's basically just someone that dives into what it's like to live in Japan just as like a local in suburban Tokyo, which is not really something you see that often unless you're looking for it. Like it's not particularly glamorous, but it's just like what it's like to live in your local area and what kind of things there are and what you should expect if you want to live there.
So it's a native native Tokyo Tokyo suburb resident trying making content targeting people outside of Japan as to for education content, right?
Yeah, it's like it's focused for foreigners, but it's like yeah, I think it's I don't know, it's so different to like life in the UK, and like I don't know, suburbs look really different in Tokyo to like London, for example. So that's something I really enjoy watching. Also, I've gotten to watching lots of people trying to teach Japanese people English on YouTube. For example, I like watching baseball, and baseball's really popular in Japan as well. And there's this one guy called JJ's English, and I think he tries to teach people English through sports announcer quotes, basically. So I mean, it sounds as weird as it kind of is, but it's like if you imagine a sports announcer saying like, "Oh, he really hit that one out of the park." This guy goes down and breaks down how you would say that in English, or what the translation of that to Japanese is, and then the Japanese people can learn that in English. So
That's really great because sports has a lot. Sports calls are iconic sports calls, especially they contain a lot of subtlety. They have a lot of colloquialisms, idioms, some of which are not readily available from your average textbook, or learning course,
yeah, no, absolutely. It's like the English will be like one thing, and then if I can translate the Japanese directly, like it actually kind of says a different thing, but I guess it's the same. It's like the same idiom, just like been translated into Japanese, and then they have their own idiom for it. And like I don't know, I think that's a great way to get a feel for like words that foreigners use that don't like I don't know, because you get taught one set of words, but I never actually know if these are words like foreigners would use, or say like native speakers would use. And I think the more like native language content you consume like that, the more you get a feel for like the kind of phrases they say, the kind of vocab they use, and like it makes you sound more natural, I think, when you
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I think a lot of these YouTube creators have always said is that, well, especially like the one I mentioned earlier, Bald and Bankrupt, he was giving a video, he was speaking in a video about how he learned Russian. And one of the things that he always said was that for now, for now, scrap grammar, just try to learn as much words as possible. And the way he said it, he describes it in a more dry, more witty way than I probably will. But he says that if you understand the content and you can convey content in your words, people will be able to understand it. It'll seem awkward, it'll seem clunky, but people will know kind of what you mean. You might need to clarify later, but that's the beauty of it. You can at least convey us a vague idea. Whereas if you don't know the actual words in another language, you can't really have a workaround for that. You can't really have a
yeah.
workaround for that.
Yeah, I think I've seen also the other side of it because I've lived in Italy for a number of years, and like, we have some neighbors there who are also English, who have lived there for like 20 something years, and they know so much like Italian vocab, but no grammar. So they actually have some like they've sort of done that, but then like I think at some point you do have to like put like a little bit of work into learning the grammar. Like
Yeah.
if you want to sound native, like obviously if you want to sound a bit foreign for like for the entire time, you can just learn vocab, I guess. But I think if eventually you'll have to learn the grammar. But I think that's grammar is a lot easier to pick up naturally because
Uh, sorry, I'm on podcast. Sorry, can you repeat what you said? Yeah, sorry.
oh yeah, um, grammar is something that like textbooks will teach you one thing, but like unless you really like learn it from like a native speaker, your grammar will always sound bad. So I guess it makes sense that you just learn the vocab first, and then you'll pick up the good grammar anyway later.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
I think one thing that that we don't get while we're here, most people don't get while learning languages while at school, we're very fortunate to have this is having a native speaker, as having a native speaker to try these out with because if you never try what your philosophy or what your idea of a language is, you never really can shape it to what other people will comprehend. You will just only speak a language in a way that only you comprehend, and
mhm,
that's not the point. That's obviously not the point of language. You want other people to understand
yeah,
you, and as a result, I think online services especially that allow you to do Zoom phone calls with native speakers, uh, those are really beneficial for people trying to thinking about trying to actually learn a second language, or even for those who are trying to integrate into uh, who are planning to integrate into a different country, for example.
we were just really interrupted by ABH house prayers, but I think now's a good segue into our next sort of topic, which we kind of talked about before, but just like how you learn language and that's like some tips we have as A-level language learners for learning language. So Paul, why don't you start us off some tips for GCSE students? Because it's
So
quite
for
different. It's quite
yeah,
different learning for GCSE than learning for A-level
so
or
one of the main components of A level, one of the main components of A level languages that is different from GCSE is that apart from the second year of GCSE, pretty much you are pretty just hard tuned focus. The curriculum is hard tuned focus on just learning words and grammar, right? And at A level, you get to learn so much more. You get to go into history, you get to go into cultures, and that's kind of the whole package of what you want. That's kind of the whole package of what you want. And at GCSE, what you really want to try to be doing to get a kind of a head start on that is mastering the vocab. I always recommend this. Mastering
yeah.
vocab is quite important. And what I mean by mastering, because that's quite a blanket term right there, constantly learning and refreshing your memory in terms of your vocab. Having a master Quizlet set is probably a good place to start, but also forming sets with a thematic thing, maybe stuff for like sports, maybe stuff for you know education, stuff for like daily phrases, like or question words. That's always
Mhm.
good. That stuff I found useful. Yeah.
Yeah, so I definitely echo that for GCSE and even if like F blockers. Like if you really want to learn a language up to A level, I'd recommend like just really take the time now to learn it while it's easy because I found like with like I don't know French at maybe prep school, I didn't take the time in the younger years to really learn the French grammar and the French words. And then everything after that got harder and harder because I was like building on broken foundations. So I think if you're picking up a new language as GCSE, or even if you're doing like French or Spanish and you've done it before, like take the time now in F block and E block and even a bit of D while it's a bit easier, just to like, okay, take an extra 10 minutes on the Quizlet set just to run it through another time. Or look back on some Quizlet sets you've done before or something. So I think that's like the general theme of how to study for GCSE. I think the methods they vary for everyone, but I'd say Quizlet's a great place to start if you use it correctly. I'd say Quizlet's pretty useless if you just like flick through the cards one after another and just be like, oh, I can read it and then flip it over straight away, and then like that's kind of useless. What I tend to do is like do the flashcard function and put it on the English first. Like I think always learn it English into target language. So I always put the English and then I write it out onto a piece of paper. And then you're stimulating all sorts, and then hear it and say it. And you're stimulating all sorts of different senses to try and form a link in your mind. Like, what about you? Like, do you use Quizlet that much for, or like?
Yeah. Quizlet was pretty much the main carry of my language learning, especially for Chinese. Um, but yeah, one of the things that I did was that Quizlet actually has a print function. I know printers are something that are so mystical, kind of mystical now that we've all shifted to iPads. But if you still have a printer, here's what I suggest you do: take a Quizlet set, print it out, stuff it in your tailcoat pocket, and if you're in between, you're waiting outside a lesson, and this I didn't do this, but obviously some other people have. Allegedly, what you can do is that in chapel you can pull it out from your tailcoat, uh, open it up, flick through it, and while you're just in downtime, you can just think about it. Just think about it. Just read through it. Ask yourself, do you know what this means? You can fold it in half. You can crease it in a way that you can only see the words in one language, and ask yourself that. That's
Yeah.
something that was really useful for other people in learning a language at 8:40 in the morning in chapel when there's not a whole lot to do. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just finding that downtime to just put aside some effort to just, or even you don't even need to, you can just really just pull it out of your tailcoat pocket, just
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah, I think that's great. Like I think constant stimulation and constant thinking about the language is like the best way to learn it. So, but I think that sort of also goes for if you're learning an alphabet because I think we both learned new alphabets for our languages in like F block, and I've recently been trying to learn Korean, so I learned a new alphabet this summer. And there's I think at school we learn it too slowly, is my opinion. Like I remember taking a whole term to learn the Japanese alphabet, and while I had some prior experience with it before, it did feel a bit slow. And what I'd recommend for people is just like find word like search up whatever list of whatever words like Russian words, Japanese words, and then just like try and get ones that contain all the letters you're looking for. Basically the foreign equivalent of like the lazy fox jumped over the whatever, which has all 26 letters of the alphabet in it. That kind of that, and then just don't even bother with the meanings of the words. Put it in a Quizlet set, and then just flick through it. See if you can read it, and if you learn the meaning as well, perfect. But over like you can learn letters so quickly that way, and you can group it in a way like you can have words that only contain the first 10 letters of the alphabet, and then draw those, and then do the next 10. And I found that's a really helpful way to do it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for languages like Chinese, Russian, Japanese, it's just it's especially, Arabic is the other big one
Yeah,
that people just didn't seem very intimidated by the writing system. And it is intimidating when you first face it. But the only way you're really going to improve at a language, this goes without saying, is through trial and error. You're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna learn from those mistakes, and yeah, that's how we learn.
yeah. And so like I'm sure lots of like the F block and E blockers listening will like want to know how do you revise for like for trials. So what was your go-to revision method for GCSE trials?
I'll be completely honest. I didn't really do that much trials revision for languages. It's just like for me especially. I had what was it, a Q book, right? A Q book that just had a master of notes for the entire half. I just kept whenever I had the time, I just reread stuff. I found new exercise. You also are given typically an exercise booklet. That's typically a good resource to consult. And yeah, generally just, and also one of the things that you'll value at GCSE is that you'll have, you'll have people who are also struggling, who are equally struggling, because everyone struggles learning a new language. And that's the kind of the beauty of it. You'll be riffing with each other. You'll be asking each other, oh, what does this mean? And yeah, it comes up comes up kind of organically. But for trials, there's no real way to last minute it. Is the short answer. There's no real way to last minute it with any real success. Yeah, I never.
Well, I'll mention this later for A level as well, but I think it's especially true as GCSE. You can basically write down every question they will ask. If you look through a few past papers or like if you just think about the topic for like 5-10 minutes at a time, and you think about, oh, my local area or my I don't know, my daily life at school, you can definitely write down a good list of maybe 10 questions, and I will bet you like maybe 1 out of the 5 they ask will not be on your list, because GCSE is quite formulaic, and if you just write down 10 questions from each topic, or even 5, and then take a little bit of time to write down what you would answer that question as, you've already done half the exam before you get in the exam. Even if none of your questions come up, which is quite unlikely, I think, because it's always worked for me. But even if none of your questions come up, you've thought about the topic because you've written it down. If you just go through the vocab and then go through the grammar separately, you probably don't have a great picture of what you'd write. Whereas if you sit down and think about how you're going to answer a local area question, for example, then you've got the grammar you might use, like I know your your positional markers, whatever you have, and then your vocab, like your bakery, your I don't know, your cinema, that sort of thing. So I think writing down answers, same goes for oral as well. Write down some answers to questions you think up, because you'll have a better idea of the questions that are going to come up than you think if you just put a bit of thought into it. So I think that's all I've really got for GCSE. It's just GCSE is quite a lot of stuff to learn, but if you take a lot of time to learn it, well it's easy in ENF, then you'll get really far, I think, with GCSE languages. Onto A level. How are you I mean currently studying A level? Cool.
Well, I think for keeping up it really is about trying to just find an organic, balance, a sustainable method of staying motivated while learning, because that's the one thing that eventually that wanes for everyone who does something for a long time. It's just trying to keep an organic interest in it. And I think for me at least, I've like on Instagram, let's say, there's a lot of channels that cover topics that I'm interested in. Esports is a topic that I'm interested in, and there's a lot of Russian teams or CIS teams, right? So an example of this is Natus Vincer, and they have, because they're based in, I think it's either Ukraine or Russia, I forgot, but they have an account in their native language, and it's cool to see posts about players you can associate with, and things, and you can kind of cross reference that, because let's say if Navi if Natus Vincer win a game, and they have some details listed below, you'll know about them, and it'll be something that's easier to kind of maintain interest, and it'll be something you automatically click on when you see it in your recommended, let's say.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think one of my number one things for A level learners is just put your phone into your language. Put the phone into your language you're trying to learn, because at at GCSE it might not help that much, because like you'll just be really struggling with some of the stuff, and you'll probably just use your phone on autopilot anyway. But I think at A level, certainly with me with Japanese, I know enough Japanese now to like go through my phone and actually be able to read most of the stuff it's saying and understand it. even if it's like a brand new app I've never used before. So and then you'll learn lots of useful like everyday language that way as well, and like I don't know, verb forms that they use in everyday speech that you might not see in a translation text. And like so, I know, like warning signs as well, like error messages. Like that's not, you don't get taught that in class, but if you ever want to live in a country, that's gonna be something you're probably gonna see quite a lot. So learning from your phone is quite simple to do. At least on my phone, if I'm ever struggling, I can just, it takes me 30 seconds to put it back into English. I can read whatever it says and then put it back into Japanese, and I now know this vocabulary. So I think that's a really powerful tool if you use it correctly. Actually read what you're like, read this with your phone. But yeah, I think organic learning is like through like literature, whatever you find is really helpful. Like Paul mentioned motivation. Like I don't know, I'm quite lucky with Japanese. I've never had an issue with motivation, so I love the subject so much. But I think if you find some aspect of the culture or media of a country that you really love, that or can just tolerate for a long period of time, then like just find it online, find Instagram pages, find YouTube channels that cover this in that language, and you can go a very long way with just one or two resources. I think for A level, download like ebooks and just read them in between lessons. Even if it takes you an hour to read one page, you'll learn so much vocabulary from that. So yeah, I think A level is not too different from GCSE on like the studying techniques, but I think you have access to a lot more content that you'll be able to understand well. So I think if you don't take advantage of that, you'll be at a disadvantage, or you won't learn as quickly.
You go from 10 subjects to 4, and that, yeah, you have a lot more time. Great.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, you definitely need to use it. But I mean, unrelated to that, but I'd recommend anyone that has like a free A level subject that they don't really know what to do with, don't take like English or something. Just take the language you're taking at GCSE, because
Ooh.
it will. I think you'll find it more fulfilling in the long run. Than I don't know, just taking a throwaway subject, because at least
Oh, wow.
at
Wow.
least you'll come away with the tangible skill. And I don't know, who knows, maybe unless you just really hate the country or the language you're learning from, but you'll probably come with a better appreciation of the country and the language. So
Damn.
throwing
Leaving,
shots at all the English people, but your A level is almost just like doing English in a different language, but at the same time you're learning how to communicate with different people. So I think that's fun. But like our last bit would be just like, do you have any specific topics for like learning languages on your own? And have you even tried to learn a language on your own?
uh, yeah, right. I tried relearning. This is something that kind of happens for people who grow up with a second language but don't actually get to use it. They kind of lose it. So for me, I'm trying to relearn Korean. It's hard to do so, because you feel like, I think for something like that, readopting a second original second language, uh, it takes a lot of motivation because you feel like you know some aspects of it. It's just kind of getting over your own hubris. That's kind of the big part of that.
Yeah. So what kind of, do you use like different tools? Like I don't know. So for me, I use like Anki a lot to like for learning Korean. I also do like sort of Japanese to take a proficiency exam in the future. Oh, so that's another thing for A level students that you should do is, if you really care about your subject, look at what your country offers for proficiency tests. So, for example, Japanese offers the JLPT N5 through 1, and I'm planning to take the N3 next year. And I think that's a really good way to learn outside the classroom by taking an external exam that covers different content. And I think these proficiency tests are also more aimed at like everyday use language.
Yeah.
Um,
Stuff like TOEFL, which is designed
yeah,
for people who learn English as a second language study at an English speaking institution. They'll have an equivalent of that for universities abroad, but those set the level quite high, And
Mm.
and I suggest not trying to go for those right away. Just
Mm.
yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, yeah, Japanese is like a really great one, which is like levels 1 through 5, and you can take whatever level you feel comfortable with. And by the end of A level, you'll probably be around level 3 or something. So, and it's not too much extra work. But I think, yeah, if you research into whatever Russian, German has to offer in that department, and just take it, like buy a couple of textbooks, and try and learn it yourself. We'll get some more tips in a second. But yeah, I think that's a really great way to feel like you're moving forward in a productive way with the language. Back to tips of learning on your own. I use Anki a lot for learning vocab rather than Quizlet, because there's a lot of pre-made sets for Anki. I think if you don't know what Anki is, it's basically like Quizlet, but it's sort of like it's a bit more open source, and you can customize it a lot more. Uh, and there's tons of resources available for it. So if you just search up, I don't know, Korean top 2,000 most used words, Anki, you'll find a deck for it, and you can just go through that, and I don't know, it recommends them to you when you need to revise them again. So I think that's a really useful resource to learn vocab. Um, yeah, I think we touched grammar. Grammar, I'm still trying to crack. I'm not quite sure how you'd recommend learn grammar for, but once you try and learn grammar outside the classroom, you realize that having nicely printed sheets with all the resources on them is such a huge win for school, because your teacher does all the work for you. You just have to fill it in.
Here's an interesting idea. I mentioned earlier about Instagram pages. There's a lot of fandoms for TV shows, movies, games that spans across many nations and across many tongues as a result. And people make fan art, fan submissions for stuff like and for stuff like that. Um, you'll realize that people will take professionally not translated, localized versions of let's say a TV series, and they'll make content based on that. And from that, you can sort of start to parse together how the grammar kind of works, knowing what the words actually mean, obviously. And
Okay.
you'll start to be able to recognize grammar is a lot of it. It's about pattern recognition,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
being able to put being able to sort things from what you see and being able to create things also from what you know. So that's
Yeah,
it.
yeah. I think we haven't really like touched too much on like the media aspect, like or like watching TV. Like lots of people say you can learn a language just by watching TV. I think you need to get to a level before you do that. But I think
Absolutely.
because otherwise it's sort of just useless. It sort of watches over you and you don't understand it. But I think if you can get to just a level so you can understand even like a children's TV show or children's novel, and hopefully there's an English translation of it somewhere. Then I think you can really learn a lot with grammar, and yeah, and vocab that way. But if you want to learn grammar formally, it's quite hard. I think you have to use it quite a lot before it really sinks in. So if you just read 5 or 6 grammar points in 1 second, you're probably gonna remember like one of them. Um, so I think keeping a diary is something I've started doing in language I'm trying to learn. Just write about your day. It's a bit Gcse, but like that's that's a quite good starting point. And always try and write down what you want to say, not what you can say. I find what a lot of people, when they try and learn language, they try and like twist what they want to say into something that they can say. I think that's not the way to do it. It's just say what you want to say, and then look up what you don't know. There's a time and a place for the other one, but if you're just sitting by yourself, definitely just look it up, and then you have it in your mind, and then you can use that in other ways as well and build off that. So that's basically my tips for learning language at any level. Yeah, anything else, Paul?
No, I think you've summarized it pretty well. Yeah.
Great. Well, yeah. So as always, learn languages well because they are fun. Trust me. But with that, I guess we'll end the podcast. Thank you guys for listening. made it all the way to the end.